Welcome back to Humble Hardware. I'm very excited to show you guys a handheld we've been waiting a long time for, the Retroid Pocket 3. There were unofficial design drawings of the device dating back to around this time last year, so it's been in development for some time, and of course it was pushed back due to the release of the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. But now that it's finally here, and I was able to get one quickly, I do want to do a quick first impressions video. That way you guys don't have to wait a week to see the handheld in action. Now, I'm not going to go over all the details of the device. I'll leave that for the final review, which should be in around a week's time, and I'm sure most of you know a lot about the Retroid Pocket 3 already. In this video, I want to test the processor and get a general overview of what this handheld can run. Can it run PSP, Saturn, Gamecube, and PS2? Let's find out. Okay guys, do me a solid, and if you haven't subscribed already, hit that subscribe button. That way you're going to get videos from me in your YouTube recommendations. The Retroid Pocket 3 has the same processor as the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. Apparently the 2 Plus and the 3 were meant to come out at the same time, but in the end some production issues meant they held back the 3 until now. The processor is a Unisoc Tiger T310, which sports a single A75 2GHz core and 3 A55 1.8GHz cores. This feels like a smaller sibling of the Unisoc T618, which has two 2GHz cores and 6 1.8GHz cores, a processor that featured in the PowKitty X18S and will be in upcoming handhelds like the PowKitty X28 and Anbernic RG505. The T618 should be a bit faster than the T310, so this is something to keep in mind when making a purchasing decision. How much better is the T618 over the T310, and is it worth spending up? I'll try and answer that in this video, if not in the review video. Looking over the device, I immediately fell in love with its size. It feels just right, neither too big nor too small. It makes a really strong case for being the perfect size. Older 8-bit and 16-bit games feel really good on the 4.7-inch screen. There are black bars here, but you can add some bezels if that's your thing. The 16:9 screen ultimately helps with PSP games, and they look splendid here. This isn't a knock against a handheld like the Odin with a 6-inch screen, but I think I prefer the 4.7-inch screen for the PSP games. On the Odin, while the performance was great, it did seem like it was a little big. There's stacked shoulder buttons on the top, which is great. Rather weirdly, there's select and start buttons next to the R1 button. From my limited use, these aren't in a very good position as I have to reach over R1 to access it. It's not a deal breaker, but it's not a very good design decision. Above the face buttons is where it really should be. There's also a micro HDMI at the top, which I haven't tested yet, and a power button. On the left are volume buttons, and on the right is a home button. On the bottom is the micro SD card slot, USB-C port, and a headphone jack. Sometimes the speakers continue to play sound even with the headphones plugged in on my unit. Here's the back of the device as well, as they rarely show that in the promotional photos. Let's get straight into playing some games. First up is PSP, and these games are running at 2x resolution, except for God of War, which runs at 1x. As I mentioned before, I have tested the PowKitty X18S with the T618, which is a fantastic processor for PSP, and plays just about every PSP game. And I'm pleased to tell you that the T310 is almost as good. If you've been watching my channel, you know that I tested out the Anbernic RG503 as well, which sports a quad-core A55 1.8GHz processor, and that processor will play most PSP 30fps games okay, but it'll struggle with most of the 60fps games. Games like Ridge Racer, Wipeout Pulse run slow on that device. On the Retroid Pocket 3, most of the 60fps PSP games I threw at it ran great at full speed. With Wipeout Pulse, there's definitely some slowdown, and I do feel like from memory, Wipeout Pulse plays better on the T618, but it's very much playable on the Retroid Pocket 3. Virtual Tennis World Tour, a game that ran fine on the Anbernic RG503, runs perfectly here. God of War Chains of Olympus is also impressive. It'll waver between 30 and 60 FPS, but it's very playable. Just remember to drop the resolution down to 1x and you'll get a bit of a speed boost. Soul Calibur Broken Destiny is a fairly easy to run 60 FPS game, and here it plays great. Tekken 6 also runs great. As does Tekken Dark Resurrection. Overall, I was really impressed with PSP, and I do think the Retroid Pocket 3 would make for a good PSP replacement, particularly if you don't want to play with the original UMDs or the original handheld anymore. The Retroid Pocket 3 has a number of benefits: a better screen, higher resolutions, and all the benefits of emulation. I'll need further testing, but so far it's looking like the T310 processor could be good enough for the vast majority of the PSP library. Next, let's take a quick look at Gamecube. I was asked to test Super Mario Sunshine, and given it really needs something stronger like the Snapdragon 845 in the Odin, there's just not enough juice here to make it go. On the other hand, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker seems fairly playable in the opening section. If you run this at 50% emulator clock speed, this ends up feeling pretty smooth. The frame rate is in the 20s, but I think it's fine. Moving on to Dreamcast, I was curious about the system because on the RG503 there were still some Dreamcast games that didn't play well. One of them was Dead or Alive 2. Luckily, it's absolutely rock solid here. Likewise with Crazy Taxi, this runs really well here too. While we're on Sega, this is Streets of Rage 2, just to give you an idea of how wide the black bars on the side are. And here's a shot of it with some fan-made bezels from Orion's Angel. This is Golden Axe 2 with integer scaling on, which means it's using an exact multiple of the base Mega Drive resolution. For example, the Mega Drive resolution is 320 by 224, and as this screen has a resolution of 1334 by 750, the displayed resolution will be 960 by 672. You're going to see black bars for all of the unused screen area. If you turn integer scaling off, like in this shot, the display will stretch to fill the screen, in this case the vertical direction, but still leave some black bars on the side. You get a larger picture, but it might be a little bit pixely. Because the screen size is still fairly small, I think it still looks pretty good. Next up, we'll have a quick look at Sega Saturn on the Yabasan Shiro 2 emulator, and I was extremely surprised by the results. Firstly, I tested Panzer Dragoon, a game that I tested in the past which ran at 20 FPS, but now just with default settings, the game runs perfectly at a smooth 60 FPS. Similarly, Panzer Dragoon Spy, which ran at 30 FPS on other handhelds I tested, it now runs at 60 FPS. Finally, let's talk about PS2. I had a number of requests to test this, and to be perfectly honest, I didn't expect too much here given the Odin, which has a much stronger processor, only plays about half the library. The first game, Tekken 4, runs slow even with a maximum underclock. This is Gran Turismo 4, and while I can type in my name, that's about as far as I got. Devil May Cry 3, a game that runs great on the Odin, runs slow here. Similarly, Dynasty Warriors 4, a game that I thought might run here, still struggles. Having said all that, the best performing game turned out to be Grand Theft Auto 3. With a maximum underclock, this game hovers between 70 to 100% speed and plays at around 20 FPS. It's passable in some areas, but it is slow. I wouldn't really recommend it, but it's interesting this is close to playable. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that quick look at the Retroid Pocket 3. Make sure to subscribe to catch my full review of the handheld, and I'll see you guys in the next video.